Do you live in Pennsylvania? How about own your own home but still rent your electricity? If you pay more than $70 a month in electricity,
Alright, so today's the day we find out if the Oilers get swept and Matthew Tkachuk is going to hoist the cup in Edmonton, or if Nurse and Ceci are both going to get hat tricks and we're going to go back to Florida for Game 5. In all seriousness, we really shouldn't be too surprised given how the Panthers shut down guys like Zibanejad, Panarin, Pasternak, and Kucherov, but I'd be lying to you if I said I saw it coming for it to be this dry for the big boys, especially Draisaitl. I know he went cold near the end of the series against Vegas last year, but overall he's been a fantastic playoff performer in his career, so I really thought we would have seen more from him through 3 games, and the biggest talking point around him wouldn't just be the Barkov play. But with the Oilers where they are in this series and their season hanging by a thread here, the one name I'm thinking about the most isn't Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. It's not even Banjo Guy or Mama Stanley. It's Ken Holland. Now, given that his contract is up at the end of the season, it's been swirling that he could possibly be leaving Edmonton after this year. If he or the Oilers did decide to do that, he will have been on the job for just over 5 years, and man oh man has it been a tenure full of ups and downs. And if the Oilers go down in 4 or 5 games to Florida here, and this ends up being it for Holland with the Oilers, the divisiveness that has followed him basically since he's been with the team, it's going to follow him out the door as people are left wondering, did he do enough to give the Oilers a good enough chance to win the cup in the prime McDavid-Draisaitl years? And that's what makes this topic so interesting to me, because you're going to have the side who says, well, duh, they were in the cup final, so clearly he gave them a good enough chance. The good and great moves he made outweighed the bad ones, and that's what allowed them to make it this far. Every GM makes a few bad trades or signings, but for the most part, he did what he could. There's a reason he was placed in the top quarter in the GM of the year voting. But then you'll have the side who points out his bad moves as fatal flaws, and a major reason why this is only the second time McDavid's been past the second round since Holland got there. The money that went towards overpays on Darnell Nurse and Jack Campbell could have been hugely beneficial right now towards much more helpful players, and he didn't do enough at the trade deadline to help push this team over the edge, especially on D. That's what fascinates me about this discussion. You've got a guy here who's made some of the best moves this franchise has seen in a long time, with the Hyman signing, the Ekholm trade, the Kane signing, among other solid ones like Fogle and Janmark. And the Oilers have been in the mix for a few years now. They've been good, and now they've broken through all the way to the cup final. But on the other hand, when he did make mistakes, they were big ones. And I've seen many people argue that it's because of McDavid and Draisaitl that the Oilers have been good and gone on those playoff runs. If they had a better GM, those two would have a cup by now. It's honestly one of the most polarizing GM tenures I've ever seen. And to me, this question epitomizes it. Let's say the Oilers lose today or the next game in Florida and Ken Holland and the team part ways. What's his legacy with the Edmonton Oilers? Is it not being able to get McDavid and Draisaitl a cup? Is it cleaning up the Oilers and making them good again after where Peter Chiarelli left them? Maybe it's somewhere in between the two. Now, if the Oilers can somehow find a way to be the first team in 10 years to come back from a 3-0 deficit, the conversation's completely different. At that point, you've got to think Ken Holland is celebrated pretty much unanimously. Man, how 4 wins can completely change a legacy, because making it to a cup final is a huge achievement in and of itself. But with the standards and the expectations of this group given who's in the lineup, is that enough? We'll see how it all goes tonight, game 4. If you're watching this before the game, let me know final score predictions and who scores the game-winning goal tonight. And of course, your thoughts on Ken Holland's time with the Oilers. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new, please consider subscribing. You guys are awesome. I'll see you in the next one. For a large part of the series, Sergei Bobrovsky has looked virtually unstoppable. It was a pretty big turnaround from how he was in last year's Stanley Cup final. We pretty much saw prime 2023 playoffs Bobrovsky through the first 8 periods of this series, and the Panthers gained a 3-0 series lead in large part because of that. But then in the third period of Game 3, the dam started to break open a little bit. The Oilers didn't win the game, but they finally solved Bobrovsky a little bit. And putting up 3 instead of putting up 1 or 0 definitely changes morale and confidence a little bit from Bobrovsky being in their heads with the, oh my god, how are we going to beat this guy, to getting even just some of their offensive groove back. I think played a role for the Oilers heading into Game 4. And man, this was the definition of a get-right game for the Edmonton Oilers. 5 goals on 12 shots, they chased Bobrovsky, and Rogers Place was rocking. Look, 1 win doesn't mean there's going to be a reverse sweep or we're going to Game 7. Although I really respect and admire the Oilers fans with that deep level of belief and refusal to stop believing in their team. It's pretty cool. But this is exactly the type of game Edmonton needed to shift the momentum in this series. Not only did you get production from some of your bottom 6 guys, but the most encouraging thing is your top guys finally filled the score sheet, and you finally got a power play goal in this series. Those 2 things alone were hugely crucial missing pieces in the first 3 games for Edmonton, and thankfully we don't see a sweep. I'm not cheering for either team, but I want the series to go longer than 4. For a Stanley Cup final, that would have been disappointing. And good on Darnell Nurse for scoring that goal in front of his cousin Sarah Nurse, who was there. Some of you think I hate Darnell Nurse. I don't. I've said before that I hope he comes out and has a bounce back game and gets some of the heat off of him because it's always on him. But that would be pretty disingenuous of me if I just purposefully omitted or skipped over an objectively bad play from him that directly led to a key goal. Hopefully that goal built some positive momentum for him because that could be huge in extending the series. Game 5 goes Tuesday from Sunrise, Florida. Last year's Stanley Cup final went 5 games. It'd be nice to see this one go at least 6, but hey, depends what the hockey gods want, I guess. If it is going to end in 5, just please don't be a 9-3 game that's curtains by the end of the first period. Also, I saw a crazy stat that just from that one game, Bobrovsky's save percentage in the finals went from 953 to 915. I still think he's the Conn Smythe favorite for Florida, with Barkov being a close second, but it's crazy what one single game can do to your stats. Saturday night at home, the older fans get sent home happy. White Ave is going to be bumping tonight, and we get more hockey, which I consider a win. As usual, give me your thoughts in the comments down there. How long's this series going here? 5, 6, or 7? Please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. You're awesome. Alright, so I did want to talk about McDavid breaking Gretzky's record for the most assists. In a single postseason. That's honestly insane, and you guys know I love breaking down playmaking. It's probably my favorite aspect of the game. But I've made like, what, 4 or 5 Oilers and Panthers videos in a row. Like, it's time to switch it up at least a little bit. And I promise that after the Cup final, there's going to be a lot more variety in terms of the teams we talk about, similar to how it was in the regular season, and I've got a few unique ideas that I want to try to make videos on over the summer. I'm excited for that, but for right now, the Cup final followed by the draft is definitely the focus. I've got to say though, heading into the 24-25 NHL season, Alex Ovechkin is hands down one of the most interesting storylines to follow across the whole league. Now, if you've been following Ovi's goal chase to 894, you know that it's been an absolute roller coaster. Whenever one of Gretzky's records starts to enter the mix, it definitely gets the hockey world's attention. As it stands right now, he needs 42 to pass him. And if he isn't already looked at as this, breaking that record, I think would cement him as the greatest goal scorer in NHL history. Quite a few people already see him as that given the era-adjusted stuff, hockey players being in better shape now than they were in the 80s, and between new equipment and new goaltending styles, goalies just being a whole lot harder to score on nowadays than they were back then. Now here's where things get really interesting, because a couple of years ago, man, maybe even a year ago, if all he needed was 42 goals to break Gretzky's record, most people would have looked at that and said, dude, Ovi's getting that this year. Since 2013-14, in a season that wasn't shortened, he hadn't scored less than 42 goals in a year. He really has been Mr. Consistency when it comes to elite goal scoring numbers. But of course, we're all well aware of his struggles this past season. I don't think we need to dive deep into them again, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about, just know, by the time the calendar flipped to 2024 on January 1st, Ovi had played 34 games. He only had 7 goals. To put that in perspective, in the same amount of games played the year before, he already had 20 goals. It was quite bad for him to start this season. Throughout these past few years, I've definitely seen more people say they do think he's going to pass Gretzky's record compared to the amount of people who don't think it's going to happen. But at that point, when Ovi was struggling hard, that's definitely the most people I've seen come out and say Ovi's not going to get this record. In the second half of the season though, he flipped the switch. He started looking like Alex Ovechkin again. He went from starting 2024 with 7 goals to finishing the season with 31. And that's how we've ended up with a pretty attainable number with 2 years left on his contract. And because of how he looked in the second half of the season, it was definitely super encouraging for him, I'm sure, but also for all the people who want to see him do it. But then the season ended on a pretty sour note as the Caps got swept by the Rangers and he had a brutal series. He went pointless in the whole series, and in game 1 he didn't record a shot on goal for the first time in a playoff game since 2018 and only the 4th time in his career. Now at that point, I saw quite a few people saying that he's mailing it in for the playoffs because what he really cares about is the Gretzky record. He's already got his cup, he's gonna go get that record. Then I saw another side of people saying this is a sign of things to come. His rapid regression is only gonna get worse. His goal numbers are gonna keep decreasing over the next 2 years of his contract. He's gonna run out of gas and fall short of the record in the end. Now, me personally, I think he's gonna get it. I mean, I definitely think he is regressing, and this isn't the Caps teams of the 2010s. He's not surrounded by really good teams like he was earlier in his career. And yes, I know there's some stuff going around about how much he hates training, and there's that picture of him playing pickleball or whatever that went kind of viral, or people are saying he looks out of shape. Which, by the way, Brooks Legg said it best in 2011, he's not fat, he's big boned. That's one of my favorite hockey quotes of all time. Look, at the end of the day, nobody's expecting him to be the best player in the world or like an Alexander Barkov 200-foot player. He's just got to do what he does best, which is put the puck in the back of the net. Also, he did mention in his exit interview that he's going to switch his training up this offseason, and he's going to, quote, do something different. So we'll see if that yields any fruit this upcoming season for how he plays. But with the 2 years left on the contract, even if he just gets 25 goals this upcoming year, he'd only need 17 the next year to get the job done. Now, for someone who's going to be 41 years old by that point, it's easier said than done, but I really do think he's got enough left in the tank to do this, especially if he has a good goal-scoring year in 24-25. That's going to be the key year, I think, because if he needs half or more of those goals in his 40-year-old season, his last year on the contract, that would mean he got 21 goals or less, which means the regression hit hard, or he got injured, which, again, at 40 is not a good sign. But with how durable he's been over his career, I could definitely see him getting 30 goals, especially given how he played down the stretch, excluding the playoffs, and that would leave him with only 12 to get done the next year. I think we're going to see this happen 2 seasons from now, but hey, maybe he's back in form and gets 42 straight up this upcoming season. It's fascinating. There are so many variables here, plenty of possibilities. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as usual. The question is obvious. Is he going to break the record? If so, when? I bet you somebody's going to be right about when it happens. That would be so cool. That'll be it. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next one. You're awesome. That ending was nuts, man. I mean, how much drama was around that empty net? It started with Janmark on his horse trying to do everything he can to put that puck in the empty net. He missed that thing by a hair. Then you get that Matthew Tkachuk play, which was just unreal. At first I thought it might have crossed the line, but the fact that he actually saved a goal there, if Florida would have came back and tied it, that would have been one of the greatest plays in playoff history, seriously. But instead, Connor McDavid ices it with his 4th point of the night for the 2nd game in a row. With how the Oilers pumped Bobrovsky again, and the fact that McDavid not only has the most assists in a single postseason now, passing Wayne Gretzky, but with that Game 5 performance, he's also now 4th all-time in terms of points in a single postseason, up there with names like Gretzky and Lemieux. He's got to be at or very near the top of the list for the Conn Smythe, even if the Oilers lose the cup. We're going to have a full-length video on that either tomorrow or the day after. But man, we haven't seen that since 2003 with J.S. Giguère and the Anaheim Ducks. It's extremely rare to see that for a reason, but McDavid is making the best case of anyone I've seen since then, by a mile. But that's the last thing Oiler fans want to think about right now. They're thinking, we got a series. Not only have you won 2 straight and you're going back to Edmonton for Game 6, buck wild electric Edmonton might I add, but you've also put 4 or more past Bobrovsky in 2 straight games. That's got to build some huge confidence in that regard. And also, look, McDavid had a sparkling night. He was unbelievable. But can we please talk about Matthias Janmark and Connor Brown these playoffs? I've already made a whole video on them in round 1. The shorthanded goals, the dog on a bone type effort. Knoblauch trusts them so much that they started the game for the 2nd time in a row. Not all heroes wear capes, or in this case 9s and 7s on their backs. I know Brown was initially brought in as maybe an option to play with McDavid, but he's just been the perfect bottom 6 grinder. Same for Janmark. Like look, Bouchard, McDavid, those guys are going to get a ton of credit, a ton of play, but if I'm an Oiler fan, and you know that city loves their blue collar hardworking players, I'm unbelievably proud of what Janmark and Brown have brought to the team these playoffs. And on the Florida side of things, there were a lot of positives here. Yes, it hurts not winning the cup in front of your fans, but hey, you still got the series lead here. They easily could have rolled over when it was 3-0 and 4-1 and said, hey, let's conserve our energy and get them in Game 6 when we're back on equal footing. But no, they came out and battled and made a game of it. Matthew Tkachuk really impressed me tonight. This was by far his best game of the series. They didn't get steamrolled like in Game 4, they pushed back. By far, most of the momentum is with the Oilers right now, but hey, there's still some positive momentum for Florida heading back to Edmonton. They've definitely got something to build off from this game too, not just the Oilers. What a game. This was the best one from a neutral perspective in the entire series by far. Ton of fun to watch, and now we head back to Edmonton for even more. As usual, I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Give me your thoughts. Please like it if you're new. Please consider subscribing as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. You're awesome. Alright, this discussion for me, even after Game 5, if the Oilers would have lost that one in Florida, it would have been like a fun little discussion topic, but not really something that I saw actually happening, even with him breaking Gretzky's record for the most assists in a postseason ever. I just think Barkov or Bobrovsky, if he wouldn't have let in over 4 goals in Game 5, still would have had enough of a case to win the Conn Smythe Trophy, especially at home in Florida. But after his Game 5 performance, I think Connor McDavid should be at the front of the line for the Conn Smythe Trophy. And I say that knowing Edmonton is down 3-2 in the series and could very well lose it, and that the Conn Smythe hasn't gone to a player on the losing team since J.S. Giguère in 2003. This is like once in a blue moon stuff, so if it doesn't happen, I really won't be surprised, but if ever there was a case to be made for the next guy who deserves it, McDavid is making it. Yes, he had a 4-point night and he ate one drubbing in Game 4, and he racked up another bushel full in Game 5, but it was the importance of those points in Game 5 that really turned this discussion into a reality for me. And I know there's going to be people saying the McDavid glazing is crazy. Stop glazing McDavid. That's fine, I get it. It's the internet, and hey, I do talk about McDavid a lot. Probably too much. I'll definitely tone it down once the Cup final is over, but we really are watching an all-time playoff performance here, and I really want to appreciate it because it's not like we get this every 2, 5, or even 10 years. The guy's having the 4th highest scoring playoffs in NHL history. He's neck and neck with Gretzky and Lemieux, one more and he'll be tied for 3rd. And the most insane part to me is the dude just had 2 4-point games in a row. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he takes the #1 spot in that list. And look, there's tons of other fancy stats being thrown out there, like he's got the 3rd most points of any player in their first Stanley Cup final. He joins Gretzky as the only other player with multiple 4-point games in the Cup final. They're everywhere, but the fact of the matter is, his team needed to stay alive, he kept them alive. That's what really matters, because the stats are great to quantify just how historically good his playoffs have been, but when it comes down to it, McDavid talked about wanting to drag the Florida Panthers back to Alberta. Being in on 4 goals, including a sweet highlight reel one, tends to do the trick in that regard. What's also worth mentioning there is, other than McDavid, the 2 other favorites had to be Bobrovsky and Barkov. Not only did these last 2 games raise McDavid's Conn Smythe stock, it also probably lowered Bobrovsky's. Now, don't get me wrong, nothing's going to change how all-world he was in the first 8 periods of the series, but a series isn't 8 periods long. And for Barkov, he's had a great playoffs, and yes, there's the argument to be made for how good he is on the defensive side of the puck as well as offensively. He's almost a point a game. But McDavid's playoffs haven't just been great, they've been historic, like it's on a different level. And if Florida wins the cup, they won't care if McDavid gets the Conn Smythe. I mean, deep down, I'm sure they want it, but if you ask them if they would make that trade, oh, McDavid gets the Conn Smythe, but you guys get the cup, pretty sure Barkov or Bobrovsky would take that deal in a heartbeat. Now, here's where things get really interesting for me. Let's say in Game 6, Bobrovsky has a 45-save shutout, and obviously they win. Does McDavid still get it? I mean, it was still the same historic playoffs. Or do they look at it and say, no, Bobrovsky was the biggest reason they won 3, arguably even 4 Stanley Cup final games. That's what a playoff MVP should do, win you the cup. He gets the Conn Smythe. That's where I differ a bit from the people who've been saying, I don't care what happens from now on, McDavid deserves the Conn Smythe. To me, it's not that black and white. There's still some gray area there. In the end, I ultimately think he does. Get it, but I do think that if a couple of things fall a certain way, it could definitely be more of a toss-up than, oh, look at all the points he's racking up, just give him the Conn Smythe flat out. But now I pass it off to you. I want to hear what you think about this. As usual, thank you so much for watching. You're awesome.
In a private social club, a lively debate
The show-stopping BMW i4 is electricity in its most powerful form. An impressive range and the power of over 500 horses. BMW, the ultimate electric driving machine. Lease a BMW i4 for $499 per month.
For the first time ever, the ECHL, the East Coast Hockey League, has a three-peat champion. And it's the team with the best name as well, the Florida Everblades. For those who don't know, the ECHL is the third tier of hockey in North America. It's right under the AHL. The Florida Everblades are directly affiliated with the Florida Panthers. And I mean, the ECHL is high-level, fun hockey. So the Everblades started their three-peat in the
Here is information from Wikipedia.
hockey. So the Everblades started their three-peat in the 21-22 season. And repeating in the ECHL is difficult because in these lower leagues, players will move up to the AHL, they'll move to Europe. I mean, having a super successful season will obviously get eyes on players. Like, if you look at their 21-22 roster, their leading playoff scorer now plays for the Marlies. Their fifth leading scorer plays overseas. 2 have retired. So yeah, there's a ton of turnover. New to this year's roster, however, was Josh Hosang, a name a lot of you are probably familiar with. But the final this year saw Florida face off against the Kansas City Mavericks, and there were some exciting games in this series. Game 3, for example, saw Florida score 5 in a row, having been down 3-1. However, it was actually the final game which was the most dramatic. Kansas was up 3-1 with just over 11 minutes left in the third period, when Florida would get their first back shorthanded, their fifth shorthanded goal of the playoffs, by the way. Then with a minute 50 seconds left, they would tie it up on a deflection. And look at the crowd here. I absolutely love it. The Everblades play in the Hertz Arena. It's actually pretty big, almost 9,000 capacity. They're averaging about 6,500 fans for most of the season. Definitely a full barn on this night. Both goals, by the way, by Mark Sinden. Then, 3.5 minutes into overtime, Matt Wedman would get the game winner to secure the hat trick of Kelly Cups for the Everblades. All in all, this video really just left me wishing that we had an ECHL team in Halifax. The queue is great, but there's something I find really fun about slightly lower level professional hockey. And for those wondering, yes, there are hockey leagues under the ECHL. Though lower level teams like the SPHL and the FPHL do not have NHL affiliation. But that's all I've got from you. Let me know what you thought about this video, especially if you're an ECHL fan, especially if you're... I said it was over for the Oilers after Game 2. It's really over now after Game 3. No team since World War II has come back from a 3-0 deficit in the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Oilers are not about to change that. I know I'm repeating myself here, but Florida is just better. It's undeniable. It's not one of those series where Edmonton is kicking themselves for making a few mistakes, for just giving away games. No, Florida is dominating. All playoffs, Barkov and the Panthers have shut down the top lines of other teams. And honestly, Edmonton might be their best work so far. It took 3 games not only for the Oilers to score 5-on-5, but for a forward to score, which is insane. And now after Game 3, we've still seen the big dogs like McDavid, like Draisaitl, most notably like Zach Hyman, who people were talking about potentially breaking the NHL playoff goal scoring record from registering a goal. Like, we cannot overstate the play all around of Florida and, of course, of Bobrovsky. And not only is it a nightmare on the offensive end, it's been bad going the other way as well. It's hard to say that Stuart Skinner is the problem because he could let in 30 goals. It doesn't change the Oilers not scoring, but he's not saving anything either. His goals saved are a couple below expected right now. His basic stats just aren't good either. And I mean, last night was really just a series of heartbreakers for the Oilers. They started off pretty strong, I thought, a good first period. They're out shooting Florida, but any potential momentum evaporates with the end of the period killer. 4-on-4. Ekholm, he's just way too cute with the puck. Bouchard, I guess it's sort of on him too, but he gets back. They cough it up at the blue line. Ekholm has no fight in front of the net. Sam Reinhart tips it in 1-0. The second actually wasn't so bad. I saw a pretty interesting stat. The Panthers had 54 seconds of puck possession in the O-zone during the second and scored 3 goals. If that's not just a killer, what else is? 10 minutes in, it's tied up. I thought Edmonton was having a pretty good second. Just a bad play. Holloway looks like he's waiting for the pass. Lets his man get away. Skinner goes to play the puck. Doesn't. It pops out to Tarasenko. 2-1 Cats. A lot that went wrong on there. Ideally, someone is in a position to break up that play. The stick check or Holloway with his man, but, you know, they weren't. Then we get the most Florida goal of all time. Nurse haters, you'll like this one. The Florida forwards just terrorizing Edmonton behind the goal line. Nurse has the puck. It ends up being Bennett, I think, who knocks it off straight to Tkachuk, who finds Bennett again, and that's a goal. 3-1 Panthers. And, you know, I said a minute of O-zone time in the period. Right there, that was like 3 seconds. That's all it takes. Anyway, 5 minutes left in the second. The Panthers would catch the Edmonton D up high. They'd go the other way, 2-on-1. Rodriguez to Barkov, and that's a 3-goal lead. And all the Panthers would need. Edmonton made an effort. They had a good third, but they only scored 2, so who cares? I'm not going to waste my breath, and I mean, that's going to be it for Game 3, and realistically, the Oilers are done. And probably the most insane story here has to be Corey Perry. 5 years, 4 finals, soon to be 4 losses. He was obviously incredibly frustrated in this one. He's not been much of a factor. He's been on and off the roster. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this series. Such a disappointing finals, honestly. Like, not if you're a Florida fan, full of congrats to Florida, but they are just working Edmonton over to such an insane degree that it's not even fun to watch. Honestly, it feels like we haven't had a good NHL Stanley Cup final in a while. Vegas versus Florida was awful. That Game 5 was like, I think it was 9-3. Not even entertaining. Colorado, Tampa. I don't know. I guess, to be fair, not bad, but Colorado was stacked. Tampa. Well, that's what we were expecting, right? The Edmonton Oilers, they didn't just snatch Game 4. They knocked Florida down, stole their lunch money, and put up 8 goals. Which, I mean, is probably a good thing. They doubled their goal output from the first 3 games where they had 4. And, of course, McDavid also beat Gretzky's record for all-time assists in a playoff run, which anytime you not just break, but even approach a Gretzky record, it's worth talking about. I mean, it was so bad that Bobrovsky's series-wide save percentage dropped to, well, a more human level. And it all started with one of the most imposing players in the series, Darnell Nurse, who got called for a 5-minute major 2 minutes into the first. Lucky for him, he's already gotten a lot of Oilers ire. It gets reduced to 2 minutes, which I think was the right. I didn't think it looked worse than the Fogle one the other night, so way she goes. Reduced to 2, and on the penalty kill, the star of tonight's show, Connor Brown, gets on his horse and charges down the ice. He goes around Bob, puts her back in front, and Janmark is there to smack it in. 1-0 Oilers from the shorty, and the barn starts going bananas. Beauty play by Brown and a great forecheck on the PK by Janmark. Janmark would then get a helper up next as he gets a nice apple, setting up Henrique for the 2-goal lead. Tarasenko then gets a tip in just a few minutes after that one, which did quiet the crowd. And to be honest, I was ready for the Edmonton collapse. Brandon sent me the Undertaker rising up from the dead gif, and it did sort of feel like that. The Panthers were putting on pressure, and I was worried that they were coming back. But not quite, as Dylan Holloway, who had a hell of a game himself, grabbed a beauty goal to restore the 2-goal lead as he flips the puck just barely over Bob's pad and in. Crazy that finally going into a first intermission, Edmonton is up 3-1 this time in the first. And they came for blood in the second, with McDiesel getting his first of the finals just over a minute into the frame. Then, the moment that shook the hockey world, Darnell Nurse scores in the playoffs for his first goal in 2 years, chasing Bobrovsky from the net. If you told me before this game started that Nurse was going to make Paul Maurice change his goalie, well, I don't know. I'd still have been laughing until 5 minutes into the second when it did happen. Bananas. Nuge and McLeod then grabbed ones for themselves as Holloway doubles up on nice goals for the night to bring us to our eventual final score of 8-1. And of course, we got to give the shout out to the mustachioed skin dog who had a great game and finally made those saves when needed. 32 big ones for him tonight. Everyone is going to be talking about the offensive output from Edmonton for good reason, but he was solid. He had one really beautiful glove save. And man, does it not feel like the NHL and NBA finals are copying each other's work? The Eastern Conference team gives the nuts to the West Coast team through 3 games. They look absolutely dominant and are looking at a sweep, only for both to be blown out by the team they've been dummying until this point. If you don't watch basketball, it's the Mavs and the Celtics. The Celtics are up 3-1. But this is big for the Oilers. They got their leaders to lead, 1 goal and 3 apples for McDavid as he passes Gretz in the assist tracker. Nuge got his first goal of the finals. Hyman got his first couple of assists. And Dry picked up his first final points. Still a little worried about him, but you love to see it. And if anything, the Oilers, I think, have given us all a little hope. Not even if you're just cheering for the team, but for an enjoyable last sliver of NHL hockey. But the question is, can they play like that again and on the road? Can they steal another one in front of the Panthers crowd? Maybe. I'm a stats man, so typically I'll go with the odds. And since it's only ever happened once, again, the Leafs in 42 over the Red Wings. I'm still going to stick with my original prediction and go for Panthers in 5. But also, bit of a gambler's fallacy there. I mean, 3-1 is not 3-0. 3-1 comebacks are uncommon, but certainly not unheard of. Boston was on the wrong end of that from, guess who? These Florida Panthers last year. My Rangers did the Penguins in overtime. It's happened 32 times overall, but when it comes to the Cup Finals, it's still just that 1942 Toronto Maple Leaf team.
The Florida Panthers, according to As USA,
Which was also down 3-0. Which, I mean, if you're down 3-0, that also means at some point you were down 3-1 as well. So, yeah, I would love for Edmonton to prove me wrong and force a game 6. Send us back at least to the land of oil for one more game. But this one bad performance notwithstanding, I think Florida's going to take it in front of their home crowd. But what did you think? Do the Oilers give you hope? What about McDavid passing Gretz? Let us know your thoughts down below. The NHL has completely lost the plot with the scheduling of this year's playoffs, and I think it's really hurt interest in the game. The playoffs have been going on now for almost 2 months. If the Oilers manage to win tomorrow night's game, we'll have a 2-month plus long playoff. Round 1 started April 20th. And you know what? For the first 2 rounds, things were good. It was a little weird to have overlap between round 1 and round 2, but whatever. There was a night off as well before the conference championship, which I thought was fine. However, after the 2 conference series were finished on June 2nd, we had to wait until the 8th for the first Stanley Cup final game, which is insane. As the series goes on as well, we're seeing at times 2 days off between games. I understand that travel concerns are a thing, but the NHL finals and the playoffs as a whole are meant to be difficult and a test of endurance. There's no doubt that even with a Canadian team at play and viewership generally high, that interest in the NHL is seriously dwindling as we move deep into summer and we have these massive stretches, or at least that's what it feels like, where there's no hockey. I don't know what the solution is. Personally, I am not in favor of shortening the season whatsoever. I think something could be done to shorten preseason, if not remove preseason games altogether. I also think that these big gaps between series need to go. And I understand that the scheduling was done with the potential of Game 7s in the Western and Eastern Conference series, but this is just not good enough. And as we approach July, people are seriously going to lose interest with not just other things on TV as well, but also, nice weather. Mr. Leahy, wake up, get off the liquor. The Edmonton Oilers have made themselves a series. The Oilers aren't giving up, and they just walked right into Sunrise, Florida, past the Boston Celtics, who are celebrating their NBA championship in the city, and shocked the Rats right off Florida fans. We'll talk about that, but we are very lucky to have a sponsor helping us out today. Let me just roll that quickly. Today's video, by the way, is brought to you by Vessi. This is an exciting one. I love my Vessis. I've done sponsorships with them in the past. I was really trying to get another because I literally only wear my Vessi shoes. I'm not exaggerating though, I really love these shoes. They've held up well for me over time, they're very comfortable, they're stylish, and most importantly to me, they're completely waterproof. These give you the grip and coverage of a boot and /Ek for shoes, which masterfully combine waterproof protection with urban elegance. And when you start your journey with Vessi, you'll also get an automatic 15% off your first order at checkout. Again, that's vessi.com/ek. Again, I love the shoes. Wholeheartedly recommend them. This was a legendary game for one player in particular, Connor McDavid. And in my opinion, his dominance has reached the point where we may be in the he's getting the Conn Smythe whether the Oilers win or lose territory. Anyway, it all started off with a bout of deja vu as PK merchant Connor Brown shined bright on his redemption arc, tipping the puck off the D-to-D pass, getting on his horses, grabbing the rubber, driving on Bob, and beating him backhand as the Oilers grabbed the early lead on another shorthanded goal. And the Florida fans got quiet after this. 2 games in a row now, you let in a shorty to give up the lead. You cannot be doing that, buds. And the Oilers were pretty dominant in that first period. Florida went without a shot for like 13 minutes near the end. And for the second game in a row, the Oilers take the lead into the intermission, but things got a bit more exciting in the second. 2 minutes in, the Oilers score on a Boosh bomb that goes off Hyman's leg and in. An assist on that one for McDavid as well. Then, exactly 5 minutes in the second, McDavid gets his own goal as he scores with the Patty Kane Cup Clincher Classic. He comes down the wing and just rips one down low on Bob that he's going to want to have back. Bit of a tough one to let in at that time. And this was only a matter of time. It felt like McDavid was on one tonight. He was everywhere, taking 2-minute-long shifts, still driving the play whenever he had the puck. But just 2 minutes later, Tkachuk gets the Cats on the board with his first of the finals, kind of surprising to say, as Draisaitl blows a tire and he picks the top corner from the slot. But McDavid didn't like that, and speaking of 2-minute shifts, when the Oilers get another power play, McDavid, with no signs of weariness, casually decides to go video game mode, crossing the blue line, going through 4 Panthers players before dropping a dime to guess who? Corey Perry on the door. Step. That would be Scory's first of the playoffs this season, and he feels life come flying back to his bones as Edmonton takes the 4-1 lead. But the Caps answer back. Just 14 seconds later, there's a big soupy mess in front of Skinner. Nurse accidentally ends up punching the puck into his own net. Classic. This man can't go one game without being the talk of the town, and the Panthers grease one back. The Panthers got one back in the third as well when Ekman Larsson scored his second to make it 4-3. Canucks fans with just big shit-eating grins on their face, but that'd be as close as the Cats would get. McDavid would end up getting an empty netter after a really good diving effort by Tkachuk, but that would seal it 5-3, and the boys are headed back to Edmonton. Just a McDavid masterclass all around tonight. He took over this game like we were waiting for in the first 3 games of this series, and I personally could not be more excited that we're heading for a Game 6 on Friday night. I got to imagine, though, all those Florida Panthers players, they could have been partying with the Celtics, who are in town celebrating their championship. Tkachuk and Tatum are friends. Bill Zito certainly did not seem happy about having to go north of the 49th parallel, but what a game. The best of the finals so far. Lots of 4-on-4 action. The Panthers came very close to tying it up. Draisaitl, I don't really know what's going on with him. He seems to be pretty invisible. The puck was just bouncing everywhere in the first, I noticed. Some were saying it was bad ice, but particularly with Draisaitl, it seems like he was just putting too much on passes, and I don't know. Shout out, of course, to the Skin Dog, 29 saves. That is what the Oilers need. And Elliot Friedman actually agreed with me during intermission. If the Panthers do win, we could see Connor McDavid win the Conn Smythe on the losing team. He's got 42 points, joining the exclusive club of Gretzky and Lemieux, who have over 40, and that record all-time for the playoffs is 47, held by Waino. If this goes 7, hell, if this goes 6, McDavid could surpass that number. Before these past 2 games, you'd think if the Cats win, it's probably got to be Bob, but now we're all wondering. But how about those oil pigs? Have they given you hope? Are you back on the wagon? Are they going to force a Game 7 at home? Is the Oilers gal going to show up, or are the Panthers going to crush Alberta's heart Friday night? Let us know down below.
WSOP live event, biggest poker tournament in the world, is...
All right, it was a wild day in the NHL, and not because we still have playoffs going late into June. Also, it was 31 degrees here before humidity, just insane. But also because we had a series of moves across the NHL. Now, we've got another video coming out either tonight or tomorrow about the moves from yesterday, but we've got 3 big ones I want to talk about today. I'll start with the least consequential one, probably. Barclay Goodrow was waived by the Rangers and picked up by the Sharks. This was definitely a bit of gamesmanship by both teams, as Barclay Goodrow apparently had the Sharks on his no-trade list. Unfortunately, he didn't have a full no-move clause, so this type of action, well, perfectly allowed. As a Rangers fan, this was a move that I was very happy to see. I mean, I like Goodrow as a person, but as a player, I thought he was weighing the team down. Yeah, he scored in the playoffs, but his shooting percentage was just unbelievable. And otherwise, on the ice, he just was not a positive force whatsoever. And at a $3.6 million contract, not good. I definitely thought the Rangers would have to give up something to get rid of Gaudreau's contract. They didn't, obviously. For the Sharks, I don't think they're super worried about the cap, and some veteran leadership. It's good. Gaudreau's streak of playoff appearances, however, probably over next year. In my opinion, the most interesting and I'd say honestly most consequential for next season at least, trade of the day, was between the Devils and Calgary. Calgary is sending Markstrom to the Devils in exchange for 23-year-old depth defenseman Kevin Ball and a 2025 top 10 protected first-round pick, with Calgary also retaining just over 30% of Markstrom's salary. I actually really like this for the Devils. Goaltending this season was really, really rough. They were splitting starts across like 4 goalies. No one was able to put much together. I don't know who the future is for that team, whether it's Akira Schmid or Nico Dawes, but they're getting what I would call, I think, an elite goalie for next season and the subsequent season, which is good because I think New Jersey has a really good core, and now they have a clear number 1 goaltender. It just makes sense. For Calgary, I don't know what else they could have expected, but I mean, they're probably going to be getting a mid to likely late round first round pick. Either way, the most interesting trade of the day, and the one that I did not see coming, has to be Pierre-Luc Dubois for Darcy Kemper, a 1-to-1 trade, and I don't know about this one, especially for LA. So Pierre-Luc Dubois is obviously an interesting case. Very strong start to his year in Columbus, moved to Winnipeg, was unhappy, obviously had that massive sign and trade with LA where he was inked for 8 years. He then proceeded to, in this past season, have the worst output of his career. He played 82 games, had 40 points, and was a -9. Even when playing with like Kevin Fiala often. And yeah, I alluded to his long contract. He signed, did the sign and trade for 8 years at $8.5 million. That takes him through the prime of his career until he's 33. I think LA is going to be very happy to get out of this contract, which also had a 15-team no trade clause. I'm guessing Washington probably sees some upside and is taking a risk, but it feels like a very, very big risk. And it just feels like the Capitals are destined to crash really hard in the next few years. People are joking that they bought cap friendly, so their fans can't see that they will be paying $15 million to Tom Wilson and Pierre-Luc Dubois until, and I'm not joking, 2031. A lot of people see it as one of the worst contracts in hockey. I don't disagree. That's not to say Kemper had a good season either. This was the worst season of his career by far. He saw fewer starts for the Capitals. All of his goalie stats way down, or I guess up in terms of goals against. But he's also 2 years removed from winning a Stanley Cup with Colorado, and I don't know, I can see him having a bounce back. Either way, his contract, I think, is a bit more palatable. 3 years remaining, 15-team no-trade clause, $5.25 million. I don't know. I think LA kind of won this one. But, of course, let me know your thoughts on all. Before Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals last night, we got some pretty big news around the NHL. First off, the biggest one, the Vancouver Canucks signed Philip Hronek to an 8-year, $58 million deal. That comes in at an AAV of 7.25 if you failed remedial math like I did. I'm just kidding, I was a good student. But that could be a good deal. If they got their top D-man who's going to play the prime of his career with Quinn Hughes, then hey, great deal. Hronek's 26, he'll be 34 when the deal is done. I don't think $7 million is too much. However, if he starts drifting down in the lineup, then maybe we've got to talk about it. Either way, I'm pretty happy for the Nucks at 7.25. I know a lot of people are going to be jumping into the what about Zadorov mode, but they've got room, 19 million or so predicted, and with Hronek decided, they can now focus on Big Zed. In other player transactions today, we had my New York Rangers waiving their assistant captain, Barclay Goodrow. This was just such a bad contract. And like a lot of Rangers fans are slightly emotional because Goodrow, scoring-wise, he had 6 Genos and 8 points in the playoffs. However, he was shooting something ludicrous like 30%, and his underlying stats on the ice were just terrible. The team is worse with him out there. It's a bad contract. 3.6 for a guy who has the overall effect that he does. It's not great, even with those goals, which I think are misleading. It looks like for some reason San Jose might want his contract. Feel free. With 3 years left at 31, maybe he's due for the minors. But next up, we've got ourselves another jersey leak. Not Minnesota this time. It's the much more anticipated Anaheim Ducks jersey change. And you know what? It's not bad. You got the classic Mighty Ducks logo too. If these are real, mind you, I think they are. Unfortunately, we still don't have any purple and teal, which I think is a damn shame. I think most Ducks fans are waiting for that. I don't know why they just want to really lean into this orange and white. Like, orange with teal and eggplant colored could look so cool and would probably make them among the nicest jerseys in the league, but I'm not trying to be too negative. This is a step in the right direction. These are great. I know my good buddy Isaac is going to get one of these day one. Good job, Ducks. Quack, quack. And a final little tidbit in this run of the rumor mill is that the new fellas in town, the Utah hockey team, are up for moving their 6th overall pick in the draft next week. A nice bold statement from the new kids on the block, but we'll wait and see if they actually make a move and what they get first. If they do make a move, like, I get it, they want butts and seats for game 1, season 1, and unfortunately they kind of got to compete with Seattle and Vegas, who